Michigan's 20 million hands carry the past and the future, as well as a handy roadmap. Be it the hands in big cities like Detroit, or suburbs like Clinton Township, or small towns like Bad Axe, the mitten has stories to tell. This tale involves what happened in Michigan's most prominent digit. Michigan's thumb is a tri-county area, Huron the tip, Sanilac the eastern part, and Tuscola the western part. About 140,000 people live in the thumb. The area is known as a vacation spot. Cottages large and small dot the lake and give great access to hunting and fishing in any season. As expected, the thumb's rural character makes it generally more religious and more conservative. Interestingly, it was also the last place President Nixon visited before he left office. Soybeans, wheat, corn, and sugar beets are the main crops of thumb area farmers, as Michigan's thumb and Saginaw Valley region are the biggest producer of beet sugar east of the Mississippi. Just a mile north of Saginaw on I-75 is exit 151 for M81. The state trunk line starts in eastern Saginaw County and runs like a vein into the western thumb, connecting farmland and small towns before its eastern trail bends north and into Tuscola County's county seat, the village of Caro. According to the 2000 census, 4,145 people live in Caro, a town about 1.5 square miles located on the banks of the Cass River. Among its many features, the town boasts 19 churches, about one for every 220 people. Flipping through the yellow pages, you'll find the usual ads: churches, pizza shops, car repair. But a rather unique one will pop out at you: a museum dedicated to the witch trials. This is Anonka, a great-grandmother in her middle 60s, and her daughter Tamara. The two are the owners of Anonka's Witch Museum, located on M81, State Street in downtown Caro. They also get help from other members of the family, including Anonka's son and Tamara's brother, Rocky, who is pretty much the store comedian.
When I was a kid, of course, you live inside yourself, so you don't see yourself as different. But according to people, I started to notice that I was kind of different, because I always did some thinking about everything, why and what's this for and how come that.
My mother was always so happy, and she just breezed through any stresses that life had to offer.
A lot of my friends liked her and everybody got along. Yep. She was interesting. She still is.
I got married at 18 and I had 2 children by him, 2 boys. Then we divorced, and I married again and had 3 children. And then that ended up in disaster. And then I met this man, that very kind, very considerate, and a very noble. He was that type that you admire, and when you see him, it's like he stands out on the street, that type that just has that wonderful character about him, even his walk and everything. And so we were married for 30 years. Then my husband died, and I was in a grieving stage, and I was lonely.
And I thought it would be good because it would give her drive to keep going. And I knew that my dad would like this.
It wasn't going to be Carol, but it was like Carol called to me.
We were looking for a office for my husband's LJ Construction. And in looking for the office, we arrived here and we were looking and we said, oh, that room would be perfect for the reading room, a salt rock lamp, and oh, that would be perfect for a dungeon back there, and this would be just perfect for, and it just kind of went from there.
People didn't understand what I was doing. I wanted to make it look like what the church did to people. I wanted people to have that feeling somehow. How could this happen? Why did this happen? Watch your step. We're now going down into what we call the Hall of Shame. We have posters and that will tell you and show pictures of the horrors of the Christian church and what was done to torture and kill the innocent people. We are now entering the Christian witch delusion area, where you can see some of the lies that was spread by the Christian church. Then here is a replica of Hitler's furnace. Hitler was raised as a Christian, a very strong, devout Christian. So all he heard was how bad the Jews were. This area is the area where we weep for all of the innocent children that were tortured and killed by the Christian church. Further down here is a replica of a jail cell where they held the people awaiting their torture and horrible death. This we call the doom room. Innocent people buried. Their graves lend a memory to the horrors of the church, all done for this blind belief and the lies of the church. They never flew on a broom. They didn't create any storms. They were other Christians. This is an area that we donate to the men, brave men that rebelled against their own religion. So they were gutted, they were torn apart, horrible things done to them in anger. But these brave men, yes, they died, but they shine like bright stars because it was these men that laid a seed of doubt in some of the minds of the people to what the church was doing. This is the blood pond. Everyone knows something about the Christian church and their water torture. There in the back are people hanging. The church had hung an awful lot of people. This is Giles Corey, pressed to death between two doors from his own house with rocks piled up, gradually piled up. And when they called him evil, he said these words, "It is not I who is evil, it's the Holy Church of God that is evil. For evil is as evil does, and thou hast done evil." And this is what it's all about. A man in a red suit, horns, a pitchfork, and a tail, made up by the Christian church to say that if you're not a Christian, putting your money in the Christian's box, giving your estate to the church, then you're in league with this man, this devil. Some think it's all about witchcraft, but really what it's about is blind delusion, terrorism, and money racketeering, socially condoned. Bloody booty of the Christian church is what the historians have called it. As long as the world will last, there will be wrongs. But if no one stands up to those wrongs, if no one rebels, those wrongs will last forever. We must stop the hate and learn to care. I want to thank you for coming in and taking the tour of Anonka's Witch Museum. Education and entertainment at its finest. When we first opened the door, there were people lined up in front, you know, and I thought it was good. It was very good.
They tongue tie, I guess, jaw dropped or something.
Most of the people that came in when we opened were, oh, it's just so wonderful that you're here. And they were traveling from, an hour away. We've had people come 5 hours away. Our very first person was a Christian, and it was Anonka that met her at the door. And why are you here? And da-da-da-da. Very first opening day.
But I was on a path, and I had to make my footprints.
They're either scared to come in because they might go to hell, or they're scared to come in because other people will put them through hell.
A local Lutheran church website said that not only was Anonka's not the place that Christians should spend their money, but in October of 2000, that said, whether it's the Harry Potter book topping out the charts, Sabrina the Teenage Witch on TV, websites dedicated to witchcraft, or our own witch museum here in Caro, witchcraft is in. They decided not to roll out the welcome wagon. Instead, they were calling for a boycott. The Lutherans also attacked Halloween as bad for kids, because if blood, gore, and witches and the like don't glorify the devil, what does? They said a parent should be praying for the salvation of the witches, for evil to be purged, and for safety and salvation of their children, and that we, as Christians, have no business supporting their businesses. That was ditto for Harry Potter. So if Harry Potter is recruiting witches, I decided I had to ask one to see if his ranks were swelling.
The commercial and costume industry has seen a rise in Harry Potter costumes, and we've seen a rise in Harry Potter cookies, and we've seen a rise in Harry Potter figurines. Has there been a rise in occult membership? No, we don't actually have membership. But no, we haven't seen a great rise because of Harry Potter.
But what is witchcraft?
There's a little saying out there, and it's absolutely true. If you ask 10 different witches what is witchcraft, you get 20 different answers. It's this much of a particular path. Witchcraft has a very basic skeletal structure that it works by, but it leaves the blank open for people to personally identify who the deities are for themselves, and recognize who they are within the craft, instead of joining a group that tries to persuade them or make them realize this is what they are. Witchcraft is a religion of nature. It's a religion of duality. Basically, the way I like to explain it to people is you suddenly realize God had a wife.
Mike says he knew Anonka for about a decade before she opened the store.
We had hoped that a theme would turn around to something more productive of what witchcraft really was. Herbalists, the healers, the wise ones, something more productive toward it. But she was more hell-bent on keeping it termed about how Christianity did witchcraft wrong. We don't always focus on these things. It had the room and it had the potential of being something great, of being an educational tool.
While some talked on the internet and at church about Anonka's opening, others decided to get active.
My daughter had teachers that had great big posters of Einstein that said, "Think different." And so I think, she had a little more recognition than, let's say, my son did. My son had attacks from students and the teachers condoning the attacks to him.
I was called Witch Boy and London Germs a lot.
What were the teachers doing?
Nothing, they just said that we were playing. I was pushed into monkey bars, hurt, had stitches. 4 boys are saying that they hated me. They told me I was going to burn in hell because I was not really just like them. Patrick said his uncle was going to burn the shop down because he hated it so much.
He's a wonderful, really good-hearted kid, and his reading level is way above average. But yet he gets attacked for being an evil person. He follows the devil, therefore he is hated. So I took him out of school, and he's more relaxed now. He reads. He'll read by the cash register.
I tried to make peace. Well, I guess. I have friends, and I was about, I don't know. I was just happy I had friends.
My mother didn't want me to deal with it. She wanted me to call the police, which was probably the best thing to do.
And he has yelled at me with witnesses there hearing him that he has to kill me.
You filed a complaint with?
Yes, we did several times, but nothing happened about it. Some of my complaints went unheard.
When a person says, I am going to kill you, or when they're showing such an amount of hatred, it's dangerous, and especially when it's when you believe in evil, then hatred is manifested.
The policeman actually put his arm around the guy's shoulder, and the policeman said, I know, I don't like it that they're here either. So where do you turn to? What do you do?
I did try to get an interview with the man listed in the police reports. I called him one evening and told him that I wanted to give his side of the story. Then he asked me if I believed in Jesus Christ as my personal savior. I said that wasn't the issue I was dealing with right now. The issue was 2 police reports filed with the Caro Police Department with his name on them, involving threats against Anonka. He declined my request for an interview.
These 4 guys from college, they were going to law college, walked in and told me that they had been to other stores and they were asking why is the nativity scene on the government property because of separation of church and state. And I said, I don't know. And they said they got bad reception from some of the other stores and what they were telling them and that. So they thought they'd ask me, and I said, I don't know. They said, who authorized it? I said, I don't know. I felt embarrassed. I didn't know. Well, they asked me to check to see who authorized it and why it was on the lawn. And I said, well, why don't you guys? They said, well, we're going back to Saginaw. We don't live around here. So I said, yeah, I'll check on it. Boy. When I called, I didn't get some real good answers, but I did find out that it was the Tuscola County Board. They had authorized it. So when I called the chairwoman, she wasn't mean or belligerent on the phone or anything. When I asked her, do you have it on your lawn? She said, no. And I said, do you have it on your church? She said, no. And I said, well, could you please tell me why is it on the courthouse lawn? Why don't you put it on your lawn or on the church lawn? She said, come to a meeting on the 11th and we'll tell you.
Anonka and Tamara attended the December 11, 2001 Tuscola County Commissioners meeting after having their attorney, Jean Marie Hansen, send a letter about their objections. The letter asked for the removal of the nativity scene from the courthouse lawn. According to Hansen, the Jesus birth scene represented a violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution that guarantees the separation of church and state. Hansen attended the meeting as well.
I will call this Tuscola County Board of Commissioners meeting to order. The prayer will be by Commissioner Schaefer and the pledge by Commissioner Peterson. All rise, please.
Bow prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for the many blessings.
Norma Bates, the chairwoman, told me that I have 5 minutes. And she proceeded to talk about religion, and they prayed twice. Then another one spoke up and said, if you don't like it, don't look at it. Like if you do pornography on the courthouse lawn, if you don't like it, don't look at it. That doesn't make sense. Then another one said, I know what the forefathers were thinking. So I thought, wow, he's a mind reader.
They were very spiteful.
Another one said, you don't have any rights. You're not a Christian, and you better watch out.
Have you looked at the dollar bill? You have no rights.
Now your 5 minutes are up. Now get out of here.
I was like, whoa. You wouldn't think they could even do that.
And I'm talking like this, but they were yelling real loud.
And they were actually kind of scary.
They were yelling at me, telling me I have no rights. I have rights. I'm in America. What they were doing was wrong, and what they did to me was wrong.
They were dangerously verbal.
And I thought, oh, if I could only get my 5 minutes, I could talk to him, because I really thought, I still think maybe if I could talk to him, the ones that were quiet, that didn't say anything, I feel like one or two would say, I'm sorry the way you were treated.
A few days later, the Tuscola County Advertiser's Saturday, December 15, 2001 edition reported on the meeting, backing up much of Anonka's story, but it goes even further. Commissioner Gerald Peterson asked Anonka if she stood for the Pledge of Allegiance, because it has the phrase "under God" in it. Commission Chairwoman Norma Bates asked if she uses money, because it has the phrase "In God We Trust" on it. Then Bates read a letter to the editor, printed just a week before in the Advertiser, praising the women whose work put up the nativity scene on the courthouse lawn almost 3 decades ago. It was noted that it was put up originally on Christmas Eve and taken down a few days later, but now the display goes up in Thanksgiving and stays up until after the first of the year, expanding it from just a few days to over 6 weeks on government property. The chairwoman also said, I guess if you want to put us in jail for it, then put us in jail. But knowing the people of the county like I do, they want it there. Other commissioners told her flat out,
how dare you bring up the issue of the nativity scene at this meeting?
I'm asking why. What is wrong with that? I wanted an answer, and they never give it to me.
I stood up at the meeting and tried to remind them that we take an oath of office as commissioners, and was trying to get them to remember that they need to be respectful and tolerant of different points of view, and they just jumped in even harder than before.
They never even deliberated on it. They never even hashed it over. They would just, that's it.
In the other situations, people maintained the level of decorum and consistent with equal protection, where that did not exist in this meeting.
When defending the right for the display, it became a free speech issue, according to Bates. I have consulted with counsel. I have concluded that Tuscola County practice in this regard does not violate either the Michigan or United States constitutions. You are probably unaware that the nativity scene on the front lawn of the courthouse is wholly funded, including its erection, dismantling, and storage by private parties, and is located in an area where free speech rallies are often undertaken. The commissioners made a point to note that the Ku Klux Klan rallied in the same area on the courthouse lawn several years ago. Bates stated that Tuscola County did nothing to encourage or discourage such displays, and to have the nativity removed, as requested, would violate the rights of the Interfaith Women's Committee to free expression of their religious and free speech rights.
The next day, I was so miserable. I was so tired. I was feeling degraded. I just didn't know what to do with myself. I called up my lawyer. I said, can I sue him? She said, yes. I said, do it. I felt a little relieved. I did something. Separation of church and state. No excuses. No denial, and no disclaimers. It's cut and dried. It's to keep the government from intruding on religions. They don't get that in their head. If another religion that they didn't like got into the government, the government could make them all be that religion. That's why you're protecting their religion. You're protecting their rights, see, by keeping it off. And they just don't connect it.
We were quickly filing pre-Christmas holiday actually occurring to let them know that we're focused on the issue and that we're not going to let it go. And post that, it was obvious that this is not an issue that was just going to go away quickly, that they were going to dig their heels in hard about it. So we turned around and with more time then did a more careful analysis of each of the potential violations of the Constitution and included them in separate counts.
An 8-count federal case was filed against the commissioners, claiming a First Amendment Establishment Clause violation for the nativity scene, as well as a 14th Amendment violation of both Anonka's and Tamara's due process and equal protection rights under the law. As soon as the word hit the streets, the town was buzzing and TV crews from Flint and Saginaw came running.
Nestled on the grass in front of the Tuscola County Courthouse, a nativity scene evokes the Christmas spirit and some deep-rooted differences. Two witches who own a witch museum in downtown Caro say the nativity scene is unconstitutional, violating the separation of church and state.
It represents one religion. It's like ignoring every other religion. And there's other religions, then there's other non-religions. And that's what you're doing. You're dominating that by putting it on the courthouse lawn.
The Tuscola County Board of Commissioners says the nativity scene is funded by local churches, no taxpayer money is involved, and they'd allow anyone to put up a display during the holidays with permission.
The law states to us that as long as it is seasonal, it can be allowed to be placed on the courthouse lawn or a public place.
The nativity scene has been part of the holiday season here for more than 30 years. It's something that many people do not want to see ended, but it is dividing a community.
It's been here ever since I've been a child. It's part of Christmas. It's Christmas in Caro. It's always part of Caro.
That's against the law, so that there's no excuse. Just because they say, well, it's pretty and it's a good thing for religion, but it's not all religions.
Anonka feels the government is taking a religious stance. County officials say this is a Christian community, but deny favoring one religion over another. The spirited debate will not be resolved before the holidays, so the display will remain this season. A judge will decide if it returns next year. In Tuscola County, Michael Rosenfield, ABC 12 News.
Anonka and Tamara became front-page news in their small hometown biweekly paper, the Tuscola County Advertiser. Since Caro is a small town, the only place for local issues and discussion is the Advertiser. Over the next 2 weeks, as the holiday season ramped up, the paper ran the letters and local reaction. The next issue reported on the planned caroling at the nativity scene and picketing against Anonka that took place earlier in the day. Also in the middle of this, the paper changed editors. Over the next 2 issues, the letters were quite strong in support of the nativity scene. In the December 19th issue, a box stated, "All letters on the issue will be published on Saturday. No letter will be accepted after Thursday, December 20th at 5 p.m., signed editor Tim Murphy." One of the people who was printed in the Tuscola Advertiser was Caro resident Jim Tussey.
I hope to bring up, hopefully with clarity, that witches aren't about good times. I suppose it is a good indication of the times we live in when witches are trying to protect our constitutional rights, as Madame Tamara of Anonka's Witch Museum is. This is an event likely never witnessed in all the ages. It is no wonder that witches try to use the document created by Christians against Christians, as witches have always hated Christians, because Christians follow the Bible, which states that there is one God, and that God is sovereign even over, yes, witches. That witches have no authority outside of God, no matter how much they worship the east, the west, the north, the south, wind, fire, etc., is highly antagonizing to them. It is no surprise that the Lord Jesus Christ is offending to witches, since Jesus says he is the way and the light, and that none can go to the Father except through him. Thus the witches try to remove Christianity wherever they are, and they are in Caro. Food for thought. Have there ever been any nations that have been formed by witches, and that anyone would care to live in? Would you and I have any rights and freedoms whatsoever if witches were in charge? Do witches feed the young, house the orphans, help the sick? We are one nation under God, and all the blessings and chastisement we receive is from the Almighty. The fact that we have witches, abortion, homosexuality are all signs of God's judgment on this land already. We all have a choice to make, and that choice will determine the direction of this land. Are we one nation under God, placing our faith in Jesus Christ, or are we one nation under many gods? Only in modern times would anyone question the nativity scene. Let us not go down the wrong path. Keep the nativity scene. Keep the reminder that our hope is in Jesus Christ. Sincerely, Jim Tussey.
By the time all the letters were printed in the December 22nd edition, they all had one thing in common, according to editor Tim Murphy. He wrote, "Talking to the former editors and publishers of the Tuscola County Advertiser, no one can remember a topic that received so much reader feedback. There were over 100 letters to the editor regarding the story, No Room Again for Christ Child. And there is no possible way that I could publish each letter. I did publish several letters on this page, all in support of the county commissioner's decision. And not trying to be biased in any way, I would have printed an equal amount of letters that did not support the commissioners, but I did not receive one letter that was against their decision. Have a Merry Christmas, Tim Murphy." Could that be? Could Anonka be the only one who was bothered by the nativity scene being placed on taxpayer-owned government property? Or were there others? A little research found at least 2 men in the county had a problem with the nativity scene. One was a reverend, and the other, an enlightened master. This is Jack Gianosa. He's known Anonka for several years, even before she opened the Witch Museum. He was one of the dissenting opinions that never made it to print.
Every letter that I've ever written to that paper, I hand in person. I want to make sure that, here I am, this is why I'm here. Yeah, I always ask for the editor, and sometimes they're there and sometimes not. I titled it Freedom to Be. Personal truth is founded on the complete intellectual freedom of the mind, based on minimum restrictions, but with a maximum responsibility toward other individuals, resulting in the greatest benefit toward the common good. It is so much easier to control consensus minds because they think as one mind based on the lowest common denominator, rather than a civilization composed of billions of truly free-thinking individualistic minds. A dogmatic belief system contrived by a few and followed by the majority is neither a sign of superior intelligence nor a path to a more enlightened philosophy. A consensus belief in anything based on the lowest common denominator, producing the maximum number of followers, does not produce a fundamental truth. Truth will always be a personal discovery and not a contrived concept handed down for all to follow. How can a fundamental truth be something created by man to control others? Weak minds easily give in to fear without putting forth any effort to investigate on their own. They would never think to challenge any authority because to them dominating authority is its own proof to subjugate others. Fragile minds need a controlling belief system for self-empowerment because they can't do it on their own. A lack of a specific religious conviction does not constitute moral depravity. The rule of behavior in societies based on a rigid belief system is condemnation before investigation. It's much easier to give in to fear by attacking the unknown rather than embracing knowledge. Submitted to Tuscola County Advertiser, Thursday, 4 p.m., 20 December, the year 2001.
Then there was the letter the paper turned down from this spiritual man.
Basically, it's very simple, is that I just stated that I feel every person should have a right to believe what they want to believe. Is that somebody shouldn't be forced to just to do business or to fit in, do what everybody else believes is proper. I mean, we're about a country of individuals, not a country of puppets. I wrote it December 16th. Dear Editor, I found the article about the nativity scene interesting. It seems we have a commission in Tuscola County that feels it is above the Constitution of the United States. Mr. Hess has an insight to the Founding Fathers that is remarkable. I would like to know where he found what they intended when they wrote the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Maybe we can get rid of the Supreme Court and ask Mr. Hess what to do when there are constitutional issues. I have no doubt the majority of county residents take no offense to the nativity scene. But if even one person does find it offensive, do we take a if you don't like it, don't look attitude? isn't the purpose of having a constitution to protect the minority from the majority? If there were a scene that the majority found offensive, would this commission allow it to be displayed for over a month? Would they allow the KKK to keep it cross-burning at the same place for the same length of time? I have nothing against the Christian belief or any religion. I happen to strongly believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. This is what separates this great country from the rest of the world. I believe that no county commission is above it. It is a shame that Mr. Hess and Miss Bates seem to believe otherwise. Sincerely, Reverend Gregory Knight.
Yes, and isn't it funny? They didn't publish any dissenting letters. Odd. And the strangest thing, and I don't want to demean the man in any way, he was very nice. The new editor, the current editor, and he even volunteered the information and said that he was aware of 30 dissenting letters, but he never saw them. Now this fellow's the editor. I assume he's, within that capacity, he's pretty much in charge. And so if he knew of these letters, why wouldn't he question his employees or the other employees, and where did they go? What happened to them? Otherwise, how could he be aware of letters if they were not submitted? How would he know? Even a hint. Did someone screen them? Did someone put them in the circular file? What happened to them? And why would he admit that to me?
I have yet to have anything I do published in the Advertiser. For some reason or other, it was stated, oh, we didn't receive it. Okay, so that, I have no idea about that, because I know my postman picked it up and he's pretty good about making sure my mail goes through. Yeah, sometimes things can get lost. The second letter I had sent to him later on, that's the one, they lost that one too. It's like, okay, let's kind of question that one.
Right, it wasn't obvious that it was a dissenting letter against the nativity scene, and I admit, from the face of it, it doesn't appear that. But I was looking to try to describe a bigger picture. Believe what you will, but leave me alone. I don't need it, so don't spoon feed me.
If you even read the article that started all this, the article was very biased and very slanted to start with. It's one thing to have an editorial that's a bit biased and slanted, because you expect that. But for a news article themselves to be that way is wrong. Though that should be completely neutral. And that's one of the reasons I was upset too, because the article was, even the headline, you know, it was just made to inflame feelings.
What's more interesting than Reverend Greg's point of view is how some people reacted to the reporting. Murphy says reporter Mary Dreyer left the Advertiser's office the night of the church-sponsored caroling at the nativity scene and walked down State Street, 1 block to the courthouse. Before she arrived there, 3 elderly ladies stopped Dreyer. They questioned her religious faith, stated that Dreyer was biased towards Anonka's position, and then one of them spit in her face. Murphy's column was titled, "Remember What You're Standing For." He says he was also told of a boycott brewing in local churches to have parishioners cancel their subscriptions, thereby punishing the paper for doing its job, reporting the news. The coverage, the letters, the possible view of bias on both sides leads to more questions I wanted answered. I tried several times to talk to editor Tim Murphy, reporter Mary Dreyer, and even the publisher of the paper. I was turned down by all 3. Murphy wrote back and stated that they wanted to report the news, not be the news. Overall, my big question was to see if Jack's story was true, that 20 to 30 letters against the commissioner's position were received, and that Murphy never saw them, and therefore they were never published. I also wanted to know why the editor ran 2 letters by the same person, the Reverend Tim Tidwell, the first one alone, and the second as part of a group of area ministers in less than a week. But when I started to look at the names of the churches that signed that letter against Anonka's position, I found a few of them took advertising in the weekly religion page, announcing their services and when they were being held. Also, the Reverend Tidwell is the paper's next-door neighbor, and his business takes advertising. As the holiday season became New Year 2002, Anonka and her family carried on with the store. She says they welcomed visitors while dealing with the occasional crank phone call, hate mail, and protester.
When they would come in and make threats on her life and prank phone calls, and well, I guess they're not prank because they are serious. So, yeah, but then I knew people were kind of, yeah.
I've been degraded. I've been called all kinds of names. I've had someone walk in my store and tell me that the church is saying that I am so evil that all the kids that are missing, I turned them into toads, and they want to run me out of town. I turn little kids into toads. I said, sir, that's not possible. He said, yes, it is. It's possible. The devil can have you do it.
They don't see a 60-some-year-old lady. They just see hate, you know. So I look at it as being my job also, not to keep stuff here going, but to make sure that they're all right too as well. Yeah. You know, because nobody else in the town's going to do anything. They'll stick out a foot, not a hand. Roses are red, violets are black. You look better with my knife in your back. That's kind of like what it's like,
But were all the Christians in town against Anonka?
My name is Pastor Jerome Bouveret. I'm the senior pastor here at Restoration Outreach Center, and started out in the back of the bowling alley here in town, and grown from there in 3 years. When we came into town, there seemed to be a lot of tension in the area. Me and my wife drove by, and we had heard about the Witch Museum. We drove by and we said, you know what, Lord, we just want to see him saved. And I think that was our objective and our vision from the beginning, was to be an example to them, not stand against them. For me to say that all the church people in town reacted in a way that was appropriate, I would say that wasn't the case in some things. There was 3 types of people: those that cared, those that didn't care, and those that didn't know what they thought. And I would say it was pretty even mix amongst the 3. And so that was basically the reaction of the community. Were people upset? Sure, they were upset. I think in the community it was viewed as she was coming in and trying to take over the town and trying to force who she was. The only people that Christ rose up against, and when I say rose up against, the ones he had a problem with, an issue with, were the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the church folk. When it came to the harlots, when it came to the prostitutes and the liars and the adulterers and the cheaters, he sat in fellowship with them and fed them and taught them. And so I look at that model. My philosophy is, what good for our church personally? I'm not speaking for any other church in the community. For our church personally, what good does it do us to stand out and pick at her? It's not going to do anything. And to those people that feel the unction and do those types of things, I would say to them, you better really pray about that. If God's motivating you to do it, then do it. But don't do it just because.
Business went pretty much back to normal as the winter thaw arrived with spring flowers, but then crosses started to bloom in store windows in Caro. At first it was just a few. Then a few more. It hit the paper just in time for Easter Sunday. On the front page, a picture of the Reverend Tim Tidwell holding one of the handmade wooden crucifixes. Tidwell is owner of a Caro furniture and mattress store and is also the pastor of New Creation Community Church. He was one of 3 men behind the Cross campaign, which included a state representative and Anonka's next-door neighbor.
This all started because somebody was in love with Jesus and decided that they would do what they could do to let the community be touched by what this represents. And I asked that man to come tonight. He has not wanted any kind of notoriety, but he has donated not only his time, his talent, all the wood that has made these lovely crosses. And I asked him to come tonight, and he's agreed. Larry, would you come up here? Would you give Larry Mowry a hand?
It's just been a joy to see people, and there's been some neat stories. Tim's got a whole bag full. If you got an hour, he'll tell you about some of the things where people have really gotten closer to Christ and just tightened the town up. And so it's been my pleasure to be part of this, and I really enjoyed it.
Right now there's probably 150 or 60 businesses that are displaying the cross, not in this town alone, throughout the Thumb. The request was from myself, Mike Green, who's a candidate for state senate, and Mike, I can't think of his last name.
He was another, is that area business owner?
Yeah, another area businessman. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is Mike Green. He's been active in Tuscola County politics for over 20 years. He was a county commissioner. He was also a state representative until term limits moved him out of office. When the Cross campaign started, he was getting ready to run for the state senate.
Mike Bauerschmidt and I bumped into each other in the street, and I've known Mike for a long time, and we were just generally talking about, because you know, the Witches Museum was right there close to where we were talking, and Mike was voicing his opinion on, it's just sad that, you know, his business was there because he disagreed with them, with their philosophy, and it's a shame that all these people are coming into town thinking that Caro now is the witches' haven. And he brought up the idea, he said maybe we ought to just get everybody to put a cross in their window that's Christian in the community and that owns the stores, and maybe that would be a way of reflecting our true ideology of what Caro really stood for. And I agreed with it. I thought that was a good idea, and I said, well, if anything I can do to help, you know, just give me a call. I'd be glad to, not thinking anything would ever come of it. It just happened that I bumped into somebody that wanted to build the crosses, and I was able to connect them all together.
I tried to get an interview with the third man involved, Mike Bauerschmidt, who happens to run his business right next door to Anonka's, but my letters and phone calls were not returned.
I thought, well, they're putting up crosses for Easter, well, you know. And the newspaper called me and said, what do you think about them putting the crosses up? I said, well, you know, it's their stores. They own the stores. And what would I think? I don't see nothing wrong in it, as long as they don't put it on government property. And that's what they put in the newspaper.
A friend of ours went and asked specifically why the crosses were in there. And they said it was to support the troops overseas. Well, I'm all for supporting troops overseas. But I figured an American flag would be more of an issue than having a cross supporting troops going into a Muslim country. It just smacks of the Crusades to me. It was just harassment, that's all it was.
Going down the streets of Caro and seeing crosses in just about every window as a symbol that they were pro-Christian and anti-witch scared us. Because these people were anti something they didn't really know about. They were anti somebody's weird fascination and somebody's twisted interpretation of what witchcraft really was. It wasn't even real witchcraft they were anti-against. They were anti-Anonka.
They claim to be satanic. Everything in their store, from what I understand, is evolved from being satanic. I think at one point she mentioned that she wasn't a witch. That how does everybody, you know, try to compare her to a witch? But yet in every one of the billboards, she had a witch's hat on and claimed to be a witch. So I think without a doubt what she perceived to be was satanic. Because she was trying to establish herself as a business person, selling satanic things and having a witch's museum in her store, I think that probably people reacted a little bit different than if she was just a person sitting at home and doing another job and was Muslim. I don't think anybody ever pointed out her, I don't even know what she was, as far as, I suppose she was an American, she looked American, but if a Muslim had done it sitting at home, I think you probably would have the same. But it wasn't just the lawsuit, it was, again, as we talked about earlier, it was the billboards, it was the store, and I think the community reacted more to, I think, more supporting their community in ways that they believed the community was. And the feeling that she was trying to change the looks of their community. You know, I kept thinking, gee, I should be able to politically use this thing, you know, but then I don't want to do that. I should stand up and take credit for everything that's going on. I said, I don't want to do that. Because I was getting ready to start campaigning. And
if I had 500 pagans in this area, and we put up a little sign that said, we're pagan and we vote, how many then political representatives do you think would come knocking at our door? Quite a few. Let's face reality. You know, that's what it was all about. It was a political move.
So if that's a matter of personal faith, well, that's fine, but it shouldn't cause you to treat other people differently.
The cross movement really is more of a symbol of the unity of the community, and concerning not just the situation but who we are. We're a very church community. I know Pastor Tim, his heart was not to run her into the ground. His heart is like with us, just to see our community come together and see her saved.
They were popping up all over, and I'd go in the store and they'd say, "Oh, I'm sorry." I said, "What? Sorry? For what?" "Oh, I'm sorry, I got that cross in there." "I know, but they're telling me if I don't, they're gonna run me out of town too, so I'm afraid." I got people apologizing that they had a cross in their window. And then I got to think, oh, goodness, I guess it is against me.
As for the case, that would start to pick up, and a few things would happen in federal court in Bay City as the fall came in. Attorney Hansen believed the government was not only involved with the nativity scene, but stretched the truth to cover their tracks.
It certainly looks to me like it was a setup and an ambush that happened at that meeting. Then this whole event spills over onto the front page of the newspaper. And included in the news media coverage is a letter written in response to my letter. And it ends up making it into the newspaper. It's being printed by the newspaper before it's even in my hands, which means somebody leaked it into the Tuscola County Advertiser to get it in there if you start looking at the turnaround times on it. The letter that was issued in response, signed by Norma Bates, on why they had to have the crush on the lawn, referenced certain facts. We found out that there were multiple misrepresentations and deceptions and lies contained within that letter. For example, the claim was that there was no sponsorship of the creche by government, only to find out that the creche barn was in fact being housed within the school system. There was a representation that the Ku Klux Klan had had a rally at the same site as right by the creche, when in fact that isn't the case either. The KKK rally had been held not even on the front lawn of the courthouse. It wasn't even on the courthouse lawn in the back either. It was another further block, even beyond that, away from that creche site. The courthouse was sitting in the middle of, you couldn't even see the creche site. I went into the DDA office. My co-counsel was with me as we were walking through town. And I met with a gentleman who introduced himself as Mr. James McCloskey. When I asked about the crosses, he let me know that there was a newspaper article he'd be glad to give me a copy of, and then he had trouble finding it, but he was, like I said, he was definitely looking for that article and said he would give me one. But not to worry, basically, I could get my cross across the street by going over to American Mattress that turned out to be Reverend Tidwell's business location, which happens to be located immediately next door to the Tuscola County Courthouse and right next to where the creche is. And he's positioned right between the Tuscola County Advertiser newspaper and the courthouse. The subject matter of what Anonka wanted to present was known by Chairperson Bates days before the meeting. She was invited to come into the meeting. Anonka was interrupted with, there was interruption with putting into the record, so to speak, by Chairperson Bates, who's supposed to be pretty much a neutral, moderating the meeting and everything, and instead she's in there jumping in talking about how she used to be a member of the Interfaith Council and how great it is, and how the Tuscola County Advertiser just recently had printed this article which was very pro-Christian in the nativity scene. And I was actually a little bit on the speechless side. Oh, it gets even better when you go to talk to Dave Norris.
Over the summer of 2002, a private investigator was hired. Dave Norris was able to find connections between the commissioners, local groups, local churches, the local government, and the display.
During the investigation, I had talked to I believe he was a City of Caro employee, a Don Frazee, and I got his name through a newspaper article where he was putting up some of the decorations. During that conversation, he had first indicated where they had stored the creche and the rails, the figures, the fencing, and it was at the barn at the sewer plant, I think he said, and there was possibly another garage. Some of the items had been stored at the Caro schools. And when I talked to Dennis Anderson of the Caro Community Schools, he was superintendent, and he confirmed that that was the truth. He did not know who would, who brought them out, who had delivered them, who owned them, anything of that nature, and which I understand. I think it was simply a matter of someone had asked to do storage, and whether it was the DDA, whether it was the village, or whether it was the county. I don't think any of them cared. I think it was just a matter of, sure, we'll help you out, and I think they do that in that kind of community setting. But there were photographs taken of the creche that year. And I began looking at it, and all of a sudden I realized that in this area where the creche is always set up, and I didn't find any evidence that anything else had been out there, an electrical run had been run out of the county courthouse, down past, I think it's a Veterans Memorial, and to the area where the nativity scene would sit. I further realized that the railings had been set up for electrical outlets, for lights to shine on the nativity scene. And I just found it unlikely that the nice church ladies would come out there and put these wonderful professional electrical outlets on this temporary railing that's brought out once a year, and do the kind of professional job I was seeing. I'm convinced that had we had the ability to subpoena documents on that electrical hookup, we would have found that it was likely governmental employees that did the work, and it was likely governmental employees that had planned and installed the electrical service out to that area and maintained it. One of the individuals who had indicated that he was part of the distribution campaign was Mike Barlschmidt, who owned a business almost immediately next door to Anonka's, I think. He's also an active member of the board, or was an active member of the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce. I certainly was up front with him what my investigation was about. He was obviously uncomfortable with it, and so we spoke for a few minutes. He admitted his participation. It was a show of Christian unity. I think that was a term that I remember him using. He cut off the interview. He didn't want to talk to me anymore on the basis, because I think at that point litigation had already begun, and he determined that he was no longer willing to talk to me. And I was trying to ask him about connections between businesses and between the chamber, between his business, the Wooden Crosses, and the possibility of some kind of connection between all of these individuals in opposition to this woman that had lodged this complaint with the county. He wasn't willing to talk about it, and so I walked out the front door of his building, and I was headed back to the Chamber of Commerce office, and I don't remember if I had already interviewed Mr. McCluskey or I was waiting for him to come back to interview him. I just don't remember that sequence. It's been so long. But when I walked in the Chamber of Commerce office, lo and behold, to their great chagrin, Mr. Bauerschmidt was standing in the back of the building. He had gone out the back door of his office, because he sure didn't pass me on Main Street, and beat me to the Chamber of Commerce and the DDA office, and was standing in the back giving them what seemed to me was a full and accurate report of my visitation in Caro and what I was about. And they were quite embarrassed about it. I was quite amused. I think I gave them a very broad, warm smile, because to me it was kind of showing that connection, that it wasn't as it wasn't as loose as they would like to have shown it was. Often the moment they found out that I was connected to the case, then it shut down quickly, because they had a very embattled attitude.
Are you quite amazed to find how quick they shut up?
Oh no. I work with a lot of people that have things to hide. You know, they get to that point that all of a sudden it's like, I think I've told this man way too much.
Because of the digging, Hansen wanted an additional charge brought against the commissioners, along with several members of the Caro community. RICO. Hansen filed a brief hoping to expand the case against 12 people and organizations. They include Commissioners Bates, Hess, Peterson, County Controller Mike Hoagland, the Caro Women's Interfaith Committee, Reverend Tim Tidwell, the Village of Caro's Downtown Development Authority, Caro Village Manager David Murphy, the Caro Community School District, Mike Bauerschmidt, the Caro Chamber of Commerce, and Jim McCluskey, the head of the Tuscola County Economic Development Authority. There's been a lot of talk about the First Amendment, but what is it? And why does the nativity scene case matter?
It was really not by accident that the First Amendment contained 5 very important clauses that were in some ways prohibitions on what the federal government might do. 2 of those related to religion. One was the so-called Establishment Clause that prohibits the Congress from establishing a religion. The other, which is a companion to it, is the Free Exercise Clause that also prohibits government from interfering in the way people believe and practice their religious faith. The example I use with my classes is you may believe that child sacrifice is an appropriate sacrament, but you ought not to be killing children. So the Free Exercise Clause of the Constitution protects belief, but not all practices. Establishment Clause is trickier because what is the establishment of religion? At the time of the Constitution, there were several states that had state religions. It was fairly common for and they came from a history, the European history, where there were state religions. I think that was clearly what the framers were trying to avoid, was the endorsement of a particular religion to the disfavor of others, or to the disfavor of those who chose not to believe and had no religious faith. So the question really comes to this sort of balancing test of when is an action of government simply intended to accommodate individuals' religious belief, or when does the action of government amount to the endorsement of a religion, or religion generally. And there's no clear, bright, shining line that divides that question and makes those answers easy.
My name is Marcia Perez. I'm the chairman of the Caro Women's Interfaith Committee for Christmas. This was established in 1965. A gal from the Sacred Heart Catholic Church here in Caro thought it would be wonderful to have a public display for Christmas. So she contacted a lot of the area churches, and they came together and raised money to buy the first nativity scene that was displayed here for the first time in 1965 on the courthouse lawn. We were saddened that someone would want us to remove this. It has been such a tradition here, and even at times when people have asked, where is it, you know, when we haven't even set up yet for the year. This is our right as Christians to, and we're a private organization, to display our nativity scene, and other groups have their right to demonstrate or express their feelings.
Because of the attention, the Women's Interfaith Committee decided a disclaimer might be a good idea.
We do have to display our sign saying that the commissioners, the Tuscola County, no one else is responsible for maintaining and has ownership of this. I think it's fine. It doesn't bother me at all to display it. Like I said, we've never had signs up before, so maybe people have gotten the wrong idea in the past.
I know this has nothing to do with the organization, but what was some of the thoughts about the crosses that went up and some of the other things that happened after the complaints happened on their side?
It's I think it's been a wonderful statement by the community, by the business members, that they want this tradition to continue.
It is unusual that you would see the Equal Protection 14th Amendment clause stick in and have the First Amendment clause thrown out.
The federal judge in the case said she could not sue over the nativity scene because of a previous agreement which had been reached between Tuscola County and the ACLU in 1989. Area attorney Michael Larkin handled the case.
As it stood, the nativity scene was more or less about the only thing that was on the courthouse lawn. After we negotiated, and they agreed to place other non-religious decoration around the courthouse to make it not religion-specific or Christ-specific or anything like that. As far as I was concerned, it turned out fine for everybody. I think the ACLU's attitude in the case in forming an agreement that did not demand the removal of the nativity scene is really an indicator as to where the real thought involving these types of cases was going.
We're going to go single file, we're going to order signs so people can see them. And then we want to stay about 8 feet apart, right? Okay, let's go. Okay, we're heading out. Stay about 8 feet apart. Don't fuck We're here to protest discrimination against a fellow atheist by a town where the officials marry religion and government. Essentially, they kept up harassment, they kept up discrimination. They told Anonka she didn't have any right to be in the city government where she's a citizen and has every right to speak. And we're tired of the intolerance. I would say it's a successful protest. Normally when we do a picket, we got about 6 people, come to downtown Detroit. We have people in this crowd. There's about 19. Those people are basically more than we've had in any picket. The only protest that's been bigger has been the protest in Lansing.
If you look at the root of the word atheist, it just means without theism. And we found that we don't need life with God. And we're not trying to take away your religion. Please remember that. We don't ever want to violate the Constitution. The Constitution is sacred to us, and that protects you and us.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah. We don't persecute anybody. We love all people.
Can you name me one nation in any place in the world where, without a Judeo-Christian belief system, there's freedom? Can you name one?
There are very few nations in the world that have freedom at all, and most of them.
And they're all Judeo-Christian based governments. Can you name me one that's not?
Judeo-Christianity is not the basis of our government.
Okay.
Today's protest.
Yeah.
What's your opinion?
Well, it's just another illustration of how God has to reach into the lives of everybody today.
So America, on its basis, is a Christian nation?
Well, it was founded that way. I doubt seriously if it's as Christian as it was, but that's what protects people. If you want tolerance, you have to be in the United States or under some kind of system like it. And those are all Judeo-Christian based governments. Tolerance Tolerance isn't about accepting that which is wrong. Tolerance is about accepting that which you don't agree with, but ultimately is good. If it's wrong, then it ought to be changed, and I think that's the root of tolerance. Tolerance isn't accepting bad things. You don't tolerate cancer in your life. You try to get rid of it. You tolerate the weakness that it brings.
Can I take a picture of you? Look here. Wait a minute. Okay, look round. Thank you.
A few weeks before the trial, Anonka says she had to deal with a new round of abuse.
That's where they cornered me, and they made it clear what it was that they wanted. They wanted me to give a retraction, and they had a tape player that they clicked on wanting me to say that. And they made it clear that I was going to die. And the only way I could save myself was to give this retraction. And I couldn't do that. I didn't report it.
You know about how many people?
There was about 8. There's this one saying that the way to get back at your enemies is to live well. So I thought, wow, I'll show them. I'm okay. I can take it, you know? And that's when I started taking an interest in myself. And I just started getting better. Even if I get that bullet between the eyes, like they said, they can't really destroy me. I would just become a martyr. They don't want to do that, do they? They don't want me to make me bigger than I am, do they? Do they want to make me more of an icon? They don't want to do that. That's why I'm still alive. It really doesn't have a lot to do with whether I win or whether I lose. I've already made changes. I've seen the changes I've made, and I like the changes that I've made just by taking my stand. So no matter how that goes, I've already won. Anyone that brings a group of wrong people, especially the government, when they bring them to test, it actually is never about the money. It's about the issues. How do you put a value on something that 2 years of your life that you've lived and put through that? I'd like those 7 people, including the clerk, I'd like them to come to me here. I know this will never happen. Here at the shop with cameras, Channel 5, Channel 12, Channel 25, and Fox. That's what they put me through. Those would be standing there filming it on TV, in the newspapers, on the radio, just like they put me through. And I would like them to say, I'm sorry, we done you wrong. We never should have used our office to promote our beliefs. I want them to see that they did do something wrong. I would even like the newspaper to apologize to me, too. Now, all of this will never happen. But then, if you put a price on it, $1 billion, that's what they owe me. For those 2 years of hardship and sorrow, for those smashing my grandson's face in the dirt and calling him witch boy, and teachers walking by saying they're just playing, How much do you put on that?
As the case was ready to head to court, I discovered that a Christian group wanted to help from day one against Anonka's claims.
So the American Family Association of Michigan made the offer to local government officials that we would be willing to pay for the expenses of any legal challenge. They didn't take us up on that offer, but we think it's important to make clear to them that they don't have to worry about some big legal bill in order to be able to stand up for the principles of what's right and the collective values of the people of their community. I think it's outrageous for anyone to suggest that just because you are of the Christian faith, you don't have the same right and same access to a public forum as all other citizens. That's one reason that a lot of Christians perceive that they're persecuted. I just thought it was rich that in this case in particular, it was two women who openly call themselves witches. Their rights are guaranteed. Of course, they demand that they be recognized. And yet they're willing to turn around and tell others that they can't have the same free expression First Amendment rights. That's outrageous.
And the tangled web of the case eventually led to my door.
I received a subpoena today, and this is a letter from the attorney, and it states here that the first day of trial will be Tuesday, February 24th, 2004. I didn't want to become a second private investigator in the case for either side. My job here making this film is not to portray either side as good or bad or to do digging for either side. That's not my job. My job here is to tell the story. I'm a little bit nervous about testifying because I've never testified before in any case.
Anonka's attorney called down I-75 to Kentucky for legal help.
Yes, I've been an attorney for 30 years, 31 I guess now, and I've done a wide variety of civil rights cases, and I am Kentucky State Director for American Atheists. Jean Marie had developed an enormous amount of research and done an incredible amount of work on the trial. I saw my job as to try to condense it down to be able to convey to the jury what this case was all about. And it's my belief that a case is either won or lost by the end of one's opening statement. The only remaining count that the judge found could go to the jury was the question of equal protection of the laws. The argument here was that citizens who believed in the crutch could speak and those who were against the crutch could not. And technically, what the jury was being asked to consider was whether or not Anonka and Tamara's constitutional right under the 14th Amendment to equal protection of the laws had been violated by a governmental body.
What is the 14th Amendment?
Government cannot discriminate on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, or religion. So she would have to prove that she suffered some injury because she was a member of one of those groups.
Is that usually a hard thing to prove?
Well, I would think so. I would think so. I mean, because the defense would be, where's the pattern? Have we discriminated against anybody else of your background?
You cannot discriminate based on religious class distinctions, and what that simply means is you can't treat, in this case, Christians one way and somebody who would be atheist or free-thinking or not espousing the Christian faith in a different manner. You cannot cut off the atheist, and you can't just interrupt them and interject your own Christian viewpoints. You can't make a mockery of them as these individuals did. We picked a jury. Both sides did their opening statements. We called our first witness, who was Anonka. We did our examination of Anonka, and on the second day of the trial, the other side was now doing their cross-examination of her, and we had a medical emergency that evolved. Anonka had not had her heart medicine that morning, and the flurry of activity that ensued before we got into court. It was a mere oversight. I went up to the witness box and saw that she was in pain, and realizing that I'm an attorney, I am not a medical professional. And I'm looking around, I said, this is real, I need help, she needs help, do we have any medical assistance here?
The Tuscola County Advertiser reported that Commissioner Ken Hess stepped forward and gave Anonka 2 nitroglycerin pills. He said she was having problems, and I knew what that is like. I would have done the same for anyone. I have no hard feelings, Hess said. I would hope no one else does either over this or me giving nitro pills.
I went up to him afterwards and told him, sir, no matter what else happens in this case, that was a kind act. Thank you very much. Anonka was taken to the emergency room of the local hospital and was pronounced fit for duty.
They really didn't want her to leave the hospital, but she did. But that's Anonka. She's like an ever-ready battery. She just goes and goes and goes. So she wasn't feeling well at all when she came back to the courtroom after being in the hospital just a couple of hours. So then that pause created the back scene plans for settlement. I think they really did not want to get up and take the stand.
We did actually get opposing counsel to come down and sit down in a conference with us to address the case, but they did bring their clients with them. And we gave our client, Anonka and Tamara, Anonka, primary spokesperson, to be able to speak directly to them, because it became very apparent that they had not really, in our opinion, thought through and brought enough human emotion to the table to understand what it's like to be treated in the manner that my clients were treated.
It came the same week as the first wolverine ever sighted in the Wolverine State since its founding in 1837. And that happened just up the road, a few miles north of Caro, in the Huron County village of Ubley.
Part of the resolution was an apology. And it was a public apology signed by the former chairperson, Norma Bates. By now we have new commissioners that came in, but it was on their official commission letterhead. There needed to be something put in writing to give some recognition that we cannot have this kind of situation repeat itself. The purpose for the government is to air points of view, to let the public speak, and that is not what was permitted in this particular forum. And that was acknowledged. Neither side nor the court's office could find case precedent that clearly hit head-on the issue of religious class distinctions as being the basis for discrimination under the 14th Amendment, equal protection. So while we're not an appeals court case, clearly it sets precedent, and someone will have a little bit easier time than we would to be able to use this as an example of the briefing of the court of the issue in its opinions.
After the Anonka trial, we happened to run into some of the federal court jurors who embraced Anonka and congratulated her and told her how sorry they were that something like that had happened. If you go into a jury trial and there's not a finding for the defendant, if you come out with a settlement, you have won, and the other side has lost. So if someone tries to make light of this and say that it's not a victory, that's very incorrect. I hope that the community in which this situation arose can come to rediscover and embrace both the teachings of democracy and freedom and the Bill of Rights, and indeed some of the better teachings of the Savior they purport to follow in the person of Jesus Christ.
I won. I beat him. Because that's what a settlement means. That apology, it helps to try to set the slate clean. They chewed away at my life. They disintegrated my life, shortened my time because I had to take it for that craziness. What price or what can you put on that? I thought it'd be over. But some of the things that the people are doing, because they're so angry that it's true. It's a fact. And they can't face the fact. So they're still going on with their stuff. You're safe to take your crosses down. Go ahead. It's all right. You know, take them down. But what were they put there for in the first place? So they're going to hold them there stronger. Why can't people unite? Why does everybody have to be the same? I'm making a choice. I'm so despondent. I want to tell my kids I'm sorry wherever I failed you. I'm sorry I failed you too, Rob. I got a little lunacy there a while back. I don't know if it's loneliness or what. I've never been so alone with a crowd around me. And they're pulling on me every damn which way. I gotta do this, I gotta do that. And I've never been so lonely. Sometimes I've said I don't know what to do. But now I know. I kind of like only way out. My husband, that was his only way out for what he had to endure and how he was suffering from that torment, that chronic depression. And I don't care anymore. Let somebody else pick up the banner. Isn't that funny? I was so proud to stand there. I'm getting better. I'm getting tougher. And then it's all over and I fall to pieces.
Hello?
Is Anonka there?
Yes, this is her speaking.
Hi, Anonka. It's Rob St. Mary.
Oh, Rob, hi.
How you doing, dear?
Okay. You heard me on the radio, right?
Where were you on?
We closed down, and I was down there cleaning everything out with my crew. And the radio, this guy came in, and he interviewed me.
Yeah, actually, I saw it. It was in the Bay City Times today.
I'll be darned. I figured it'd be in the newspaper, too. But the guy that interviewed me shook my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Then he said, I can't do this. I just can't do this. And he hugged me. He said, I got to hug you. I think you're a wonderful person and all that shit. That was nice, you know.
Actually, I stopped by the place last week because I had heard from some people who had stopped by that you were closed. So I didn't know because I hadn't heard from you.
I'm sorry I didn't call you, too. I should have let you know.
How you been, though?
Okay. Couldn't be better. Excited. I'm so excited.
Do you know when you guys expect to be, moving all the stuff out? Are you doing that slowly, or what's the deal?
Oh, Rob, I did it already.
Oh, yeah?
Tamara had a breakdown, a very nervous breakdown, and I can't blame her. And what I'm going to show you is her divorce decree. They took her over the coals. You won't believe it. They really did a number on her. But it's out. I got it out. It took me 4 days, and I had a crew. There were 7 of them, and I have never left a place and didn't clean up behind myself.
You got some other stuff brewing? You got some stuff?
Have I ever. Yeah. The shop is closed, but the business isn't. Anonka is alive and well, strong and going full force. The shop was 10,000 square feet, and now I am at 10 plus ultra acres. And I have not stopped. I have people calling me, people coming over. I'm not set up yet, but I'm doing readings. I'm still doing it, It's so exciting.
Well, it sounds like you definitely have a plan, and we'll talk about it when I see you this weekend.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Maybe some people might say they made me close, but they didn't. Some people might even say they ran me out of town, but they didn't. Some people might even say they scared me and I took off, but they didn't. The main thing was the building, Anonka's building, was in the divorce, the litigation, So that was the main thing for closing. They had to sell it.
What would you say to some people who feel happy that maybe you're not in town anymore?
Well, I actually feel sorry for them, because I know there's a lot of people that speak out of things that they were taught, and they can't seem to get away from that. A famous person said this, I don't know his name, but if it doesn't kill you, it makes you better. I don't hold any animosities. What was done to me, some horrible things was done to my family and that, but I don't hold any hate or animosities. And I hope that this documentary can show people that it's okay to be different.